Ask the Podcast Coach for November 16th, 2019.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that fun-filled music that means it's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm your host, Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com. And speaking of live, if you want to jump in live, simply go to askthepodcastcoach.com/live. That's where you can see our chat room. And if you actually want to jump into the video with us, you can simply go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join, and you will be here live with myself and the one and only Jim Collison from theaverageguy.tv, and we'll take your questions. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. There's never anything a little more unsettling when your gear is not 100%, right? When you start doing stuff. And for whatever reason, I'm hearing you great, but my own audio back to me this morning seems a little off. And so I think so you think, well, maybe my earbuds are bad. No, I hear you just fine. Okay, connection, checking the mixer volume wise. It sounds okay now, and you've told me everything's okay, but it is unsettling. One of those reasons why I think a really good idea to over obsess and check your hardware, because you don't want to get to an interview. Like, I'm hearing one side louder than the other right now for me, just me, not you, but just for me. That's unsettling during an interview. If I was interviewing you, I would not want that. So it is good. This is an area I always tell people, if they're obsessing about their tech, it's probably not a bad thing, because it's important, right? It's important for you that you are comfortable with your setup, especially when you're doing the interview. If you're thinking about other things other than the interview, it can go pretty bad.
It's distracting. Yeah, that's you want to always test. That's what we say. Go interview your best friend or somebody. Make sure that hardware works, because that is one of the things, like you said, if you're sitting there constantly looking at the meter going, is it going? Is the record button on?
No, right.
Which, by the way, it wasn't, but now it is. That's
So, you get distracted from it. And I have you in this show. I could literally test all show, and I know you're there to carry it and cover it, and it's gonna be fine. But if you have a new interviewee and you're trying to do it, you've got to really focus on that. So make sure your gear works. I think I'm going to spill some coffee in this mixer by the end of the show. Maybe at the end of the show is when we'll do it. And then I cannot stop thinking about that Roadcaster Pro. So
it's a fun little piece of advice. I know I've been having fun on my Building a Better Dave show. I've been plugging my guitar into it, which is super easy. All you need, he said, looking for the adapter, which I can't find. Oh, it's because it's connected to my guitar cable now. It's just an XLR to 1/4-inch input. And once I, figure out how to turn the gain down, there's some things like that. But it's a fun little piece of advice. Fred is asking in the chat room, did you hear the episode from Pod School in Australia about having several mics connected to your computer via USB? I did not. There are a couple podcasts that I don't listen to anymore, and mainly because if they're just talking gear and, it's after a while, I think I'm still subscribed, but I listen to about 10 minutes. And if they say, all right, today we're going to talk about the Shure SM7B, I go, next. I already know about it, that whole 9 yards. But if you want to connect a bunch of, like Jim just said, probably the easiest way, the Roadcaster Pro is really handy. Or if I don't have it sitting under my desk anymore, there's there's USB interfaces like Focusrites. And I know, Jim, you were looking at some this week.
Yeah, I just bought the Behringer version, the $40 version on Amazon. Forgive me for not knowing. I can look it up, but
it's I should know. It's something U2. No, that's a band.
You look it up. Let me talk about it, because I was thinking at one point 3 years ago, 2015. I guess that's 4 years ago. I bought the PreSonus, the blue box, right? That's USB and no, it's bus powered. So it means the power comes off the USB port. And we monkeyed around with it. I didn't like it. I even wrote it up. It's funny. I was asking you questions about it in our Slack channel. And then I thought, maybe I wrote about this. And so I went out and searched my own site. Sure enough, I had written my own thoughts. And so, it helps to go find your own stuff. And I didn't like it because it mostly requires a software mixer, and I'm not a big fan of running hardware with a software mixer. So I almost bought that again. Here's the need. I'm going to Europe in 2 weeks. I'll be in London. We're doing a whole bunch of recording there. And I want to run the wireless. We have lav mics we're taking with us. I want to run those through USB so I can push them out to YouTube because we're going to do all our recording via YouTube. And I was taking a mixer. I have a Yamaha 2-channel mixer with me, but it's only 110 or 125. And like it's pretty specific. If I plugged it in, poof, puff the magic dragon, right? So I was like, okay, I could buy another mixer just for Europe. And then I thought, maybe these audio how I got here. So I looked at that and I looked at the Focusrite stuff and I thought, okay, I could go this route, but I haven't really tried this low end, this Behringer. I think they have the Xenix. Is that right? The Xenix preamps are in those.
Yeah,
Is
there's
that how you pronounce that?
Yeah, the UMC 22 is a single channel. Just going in, I'm looking down here to see if they say what preamps are in here. But they're not bad. I have the one where you can have multiple, like it's kind of like the 2i2 on the Focusrite. It's 2 XLR inputs, and they're not bad. I actually now recommend these more than mixers. I recommend a mixer if you're doing live stuff where you want to add that bass to your voice or treble to your voice live. But then depending on what you have, then you have to deal with mix minus, where most of these USB interfaces, the mix minus is kind of built in. Mm-hmm. And as long as you're using a decent microphone, you're going to sound okay. You can always add the bass and treble later and you're good to go. So, and plus, I've seen so many people when you put a mixer in front of them and they see the 24 knobs in front of them and you go, you're only going to use 6 of these. They can't get over the fact that there's 18 sitting there and they're like, but what about these? And so it gets a little crazy. So these are a little less intimidating.
Yeah. And it's $40. Actually, I went to Amazon first and they couldn't get it to me until December 15th and the event is December 4th. So it's like, okay, well, that's not going to work, Amazon. So I went over to Sweetwater. And same price, free shipping. They had it to me. I ordered it Wednesday. I had it on Friday. I don't know why I don't check out Sweetwater a little more often. This was a great experience on Sweetwater. So I don't know do you order from them very often, Dave? Have you?
I have never. I'm aware of them.
So I got an email. Then I got a text from a person who said, "Hey, we got your order. Thanks for ordering from us." Then he called me and left a voicemail. "Hey, my name's Greg, and I'm here I bought a $40 thing. No, same price as Amazon. This guy calls me Greg. I don't know if that's his name, but let's just say it is. And he's like, if you have any questions, call me. Like, we have experts to help you set this up. It was a $40 piece of equipment, right? Not like I bought a $600 Roadcaster.
Right.
So I didn't because I was like, I'm okay. But and then he was like, in the text, they were like, okay, it's all set. It's actually gone out and you'll get it Friday. And sure enough, Friday, it was sitting in my chair at work. And so just a really great, I mean, if Amazon is not your thing or you want to go against the man or whatever you want to do, right. Sweetwater seems to be or at least I did one purchase there. So let's just be really clear. But great experience. So it came in, unboxed it. I should have done a video. Unboxed it, set it up, plugged everything into it, tested it. It's got 3 knobs on the top to adjust. Very, very simple. It's got like a gain, has like a headphone thing, and something else. And it's USB powered. So I don't have to worry about plugging it into any European power or any of those kinds of things, which reminds me I need to buy some adapters. And then because their plugs are different, right? In the UK. Yeah. And then
now you just have to worry about blowing up your
Well, I checked everything, right? That's I checked every single power plug or whatever on all my equipment to make sure they're rated both ways. 30 years ago when I lived in Europe, nothing was, you had to have a converter thing, right? To make it work. Today, just about every kind of electronic equipment is rated both. It'll automatically switch itself on the inside. Not everything. My Yamaha mixer, not the case.
Yeah, I'm going to say I would still, if it was me, I would bring a
double
converter.
Check. Or double check everything, like your laptops, any of those kinds of equipment. It'll say on the plug if it's rated to go both ways.
Yeah. Dan in the chat room says, I had the same experience with Sweetwater when I bought from them a few months ago. Had a great chat with a guy there about my setup and recommendations. I know Danny Osment from, I want to say Green Acres, but that's not it. Emerald something. He's a good guy. Danny Osment. He's the guy that used to he had a studio in Nashville and then started editing for podcasters. And I know he's a big Sweetwater fan. Here's the thing. When it comes down to price, the only way you can differentiate yourself is through service. And I mean, I know I work for Libsyn, and every time we have a meeting, we are always talking about, does that meet the benchmark of world-class customer service? You know, we're always trying to think about what is the next question they're going to ask. Don't just answer this question, but what's the next question that's going to come after that? And can we answer that first? And thank you so much, Kim. Emerald City. I knew it was something. I knew it was Wizard of Oz, kind of green something. Jason says, hey, I blew up a converter in Turkey. There you go.
He also blew up as Alexa. Sorry.
Yeah.
The Alesis, not the other A word.
Yeah.
In Russia. So
there you go. He's on a roll.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with those. The plugs, if you look at any plug, it will show you its rating. So it'll tell you if it's the various, there's basically 2 different voltages between the United States and the rest of the world for the most part. And the problem is the rest of the world runs at a little bit higher.
Yeah.
So you plug anything US that's rated at whatever, the 125, or I think it's 110, 125, then woof, they just fry. You get,
and you're using a lav mic?
We are. So we're actually using kind of commercial grade lavs that the company bought for another application that they're not being used for. So grab those lavs. We're gonna be doing these Ignite sessions where people talk for 7 minutes, and the slides are moving and you got to keep talking. We did these at Podcast Movement. Anyways, so yeah, we're going lav for those, and then for the podcast, we're doing a live podcast from the Shard Wednesday evening. We'll use handheld mics for those, but it worked out pretty well.
Well, this is also, and we're going to keep this in podcasting, although I'm going to take a slight tangent here. You had this great experience ordering something. I ordered something from Amazon, and it would have been free, like the typical Prime, free in 2 days, or I could have it free shipping one day. I just had to go pick it up about 7 minutes from my house. So I'm like, oh, let's do that. I've never done that. So here's what was freaky about it is I go in and it says, hey, your thing is there. It's at the pickup location. So I print out a receipt, and I'm expecting to walk in and hand the receipt to somebody, and they're going to go get my package. And I walk in, and it's like, step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. And I'm like, okay. So I pull up my Amazon app, and it basically says, where you at? And I'm like, okay, you can use my location. And it goes, oh, okay, I see where you are. Your package will be available in 1 minute. And I'm like, okay. So I read the wall, and it's like, step 2, scan your code. And I'm like, okay. So I click the app, and it goes, here's your code. And I walk over, put it on this little red LED scanner, and it's like, boop. And it goes, your product will be available in Bay 3. And I'm like, okay, I wonder where Bay 3 is. About that time, I hear, chick, and this door opens, and there's my thing. And I was like, oh, this is some wicked cool technology that just eliminated about 5 jobs. But now I say that because think about it. Sweetwater knows they're battling against Amazon. So what's the exact opposite of what I just did? Let's just inject people into this. Like there's too many people. Wait, what can I do? So it's one of those things where if you're a podcaster and everybody else is doing interview shows, and they're interviewing people on fire, maybe it's time to zag, because after a while, there's enough interview shows or inspirational shows or things like that.
When I started my tech show, like there were thousands of tech shows.
Yeah.
Like everybody was doing a tech show 9 years ago when we started. 9-year anniversary of that coming up here in December. And everybody was doing it. Today, not as many tech shows. So I'm kind of hoping, like, if I stay around a while, I'll be the last one left.
Yeah. Here's a great thing. Name redacted for the recording. Says, I do that when I need a high gear purchases from my wife. That's it. Or you're like, I got to get home before she does. That's always fun.
I just have it shipped to work. There you go.
That's the solution.
That's the easiest thing. Just have it shipped to work. 101 Gallup Drive.
Yeah. Bandrew is in the chat room. Yay, Bandrew. Sweetwater is nice because I can call and talk directly to someone. That in alone, any company, the fact that you can get somebody on the phone is amazing. So
I think so. I mean, I'm still going to shop, but I think if I have a choice between Amazon and Sweetwater, I think I'm going to start going with Sweetwater
Well,
because if I have problems, I like Bander said, if I have problems, I can call Greg. Like
That's
an
it.
old Greg will pick up the phone and be like, "Oh yeah, we got somebody who can help you." Amazon, they're getting a little bit better with that. I mean, I think they figured out too. You can call Amazon. You can't. Takes a little bit of effort to get to somebody, but I've texted them, or not texted. I've messaged with them too. Their return system via chat is actually pretty great. They don't ask a lot of questions. They're like, "Here's your label, stick it on there, mail it." Like it's that fast, but. I think I'm going to give Sweetwater a try. Randy used Sweetwater, I think, for when he did his Rodecaster Pro project.
Well, he did a thing that was really cool where, what was it? You could buy a Sweetwater gift card.
Yeah.
Is how you did that. We should also mention, just for the record, we're not getting paid by Sweetwater for this.
Yeah,
in fact, if I had one problem with Sweetwater, no affiliate program. Like, what's going on over there, guys? Come on.
Yeah. They're mentioning B&H too in the chat room.
Yeah.
And have you used B&H much? I've used them for one or two things.
Yeah, I've used them for things that I couldn't get on Amazon. And they're same thing. They were the whole ordering process was great. I didn't have anybody call or text me, but I know they're always like, "We're here if you need it." And again, it was the non-robotic, non-form letter. It seemed like a personal kind of mention here.
Listen, it's going to make me rethink buying gear and checking a few other places, including B&H and Sweetwater when I do this. It was a really good experience, and Amazon could not have delivered. This is the surprise on this kind of equipment. Amazon could not deliver in the time I needed it, and that's pretty unusual, right?
Yeah,
usually
it is.
Usually you think of it and Amazon has it delivered. You're like, maybe if I was thinking about, boom, there it is. And you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So
Ross says, "I don't order gear beyond a certain price point. When it gets pricey, Ross is not going with Amazon."
Well, and I don't, it's everybody's preference.
Yeah, that's it.
I would buy a Rodecaster Pro from Amazon, no problem.
Bandrew might have the skinny.
Okay.
Says they might be rolling out an affiliate program.
Nice.
Ooh, that would be And then I've never been there, but if you've ever been to the New York City showroom, from what I understand, it's like a Kmart, except it's all just gear from head to toe. So it's crazy.
It's kind of like Best Buy used to be before the crash, right? When you could go to Best Buy or any of those, the heyday of the electronic store, the big box electronic store, at least here in the United States. Best Buy. What was the other one?
There was
USA,
Hypercenter for a while,
and they were great. Now they're they're like a skeleton, right? You go in there and they're getting it handed to them by Amazon and Sweetwater and such. So,
Gary says, "I think the way Rode refers to Amazon and phony gear is odd, though. They're very into authorized deal. I've never heard of this where people are selling. Is it like fake gear on Amazon?
Yep. That happened to my wife. She bought I wanted some Bluetooth earbuds, and I said, I just did a quick search on it like this. And I got to a site. I thought she would go do it, and she did the exact link. And that link was they were definitely not what we were looking for. They were cheap, but they were not what we were looking for. They were counterfeit. So you have to be careful. Amazon's watches pretty carefully, but imagine trying to watch a store that has a gazillion things in it. Like, things are going to slip by for sure, right?
Yeah. They say that Rode has a notice on their website to be careful. Because I know if you go to schoolofpodcasting.com/Rodecaster, it directs, because they didn't sell on Amazon at all for a long time. And then they finally put it over there. And I was like, well, that's good, because they have a better commission than they do at B&H. So
if you get the wrong thing on Amazon, the great news is it's super easy to send stuff back. Like that, nobody's fighting you on that. You call them, if they ask you a few questions, you have a label. I mean, it is pretty easy, but I think you have to be careful. I think price compared, if it was, like today, if it was Sweetwater, Amazon, B&H, and Sweetwater they were all, the prices were all very, very close to each other. Yeah, I don't think I have to go Amazon. I had such a great experience with them. So
yeah. Well, and it's like you said, if It's how do I stand out in a crowded room? Andrew was saying that one of the other ones was, of course, Circuit City.
Circuit City is what I was trying to think of. Yeah,
which is now a Harley Davidson.
For you, for us, it's a grocery store. Our Circuit City is now a grocery store, like an Aldi or something like that.
Yeah, I remember in Canton, Ohio, which is about half hour south of me, home of the Football Hall of Fame. They had literally across the street was Best Buy, Circuit City, and you go down like a block and a half, and there was Hyperstore, and then there was another CompUSA. CompUSA. CompUSA was the weirdest one because you would go in and you would say, "Oh, I want that." And they'd go, "Great, we have to get it from the back." And you're like, "Okay." And they're like, "Here's a piece of paper." And you'd like have to then wait. It was like a roach motel. You could get in there. Getting out was like, forget about it.
I think they took a warehouse model, which was to show a few things out front and then stock everything in the back.
Yes, this is fun. Circuit City is now Planet Fitness in Minnesota.
It's a lot of different things now.
Yeah, it's always fun.
What's the there's a Microcenter too, right? That's more computer stuff,
dude, that is like, there are two places. One was the first time I walked into a Guitar Center, and I was like, it was just, very angelic kind of, I was like, I couldn't believe it, which now is weird because the great thing about Guitar Center back in the day was they carried everything. I mean, it was like, holy cow. And now they've really shrunk down their inventory. They're doing like half the store now in Guitar Center is lessons. And I'm like, you guys do know there's YouTube, right? Like kids don't do lessons anymore, but I'll give them credit. They're actually people in there playing. And then the other one is Microcenters. There's one, it's about almost an hour away. And I will when I bought my, remember you recommended the metal, not a hub. It's a thing with ports on it. Sounds like 3 syllables. I forget.
Router?
Router, yeah, basically. And I drove there to get it because everything else was like, ship it. And I'm like, I'll just take a lovely drive to almost.
Fry's is the other, Jason Bryant.
Yeah.
Fry's is the other electronics store. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are pretty great. The Microcenter and the Fry's, whenever we get a chance, whenever I'm in a city that has one, we don't have any of those here in Omaha. So it's
it's amazing. And it's just because then it becomes too many choices. You're like, okay, I need a line conditioner. And you go into the aisle of line conditioners, like, well, there's this one, that one, or this one has USB. This one does that. This one does your laundry. Yeah. It's just crazy. So
we did a meetup in Indianapolis for 6 or 7 years, tech meetup every fall. We get together, a bunch of us, about 40 guys, and there was a Fry's right across the street from the place we would do the meetup. And so part of the meetup was in mass, all of us just walking over to Fry's. And Fry's was cool enough. At one year, they gave us gift packs that had $5 gift cards and a little trinket and some swag. And of course, you get a $5 gift card. You're not from the area. You're thinking, okay, I better use this thing tonight. So you start looking for something to buy, right? And almost all of them, I mean, these are guys, 35, 55 white males with lots of disposable income. They were buying something. So somebody walked out. So good for Fry's for taking care of us with a little $5 gift card. They didn't have to, but they knew we were coming and they did.
Well, the other thing too about Microcenter when in there, the guys that are walking around the aisles know their stuff like nobody's business, which kind of reminds me of, I don't know if it's still the case, but I know when Home Depot opened up, they had Mr. Green Jeans was in the aisle helping you out in home and garden and all this other, like everybody there knew their stuff. I don't know if that's still the case there, but that was a cool thing. And this again can kind of apply to podcasting. So if you are in a crowded market, this is where we say all the time, when you're little, embrace your smallness and answer every email, reply to every tweet, go out and intermingle with your audience, because the big people, those lovely podcasts with a staff of 18 are probably not doing that. And that's what's going to set you apart and start to build that relationship and that whole 9 yards. So Fred is saying in Phoenix, the Fry's is next to a college for tech. Oh, how awesome is that? So Evo Terra has a venue for the Arizona PodCamp. Very cool. Awesome.
Yeah, sometimes those places, you've talked about for your podcaster meetup type deals when you're doing those. We talked about like community colleges and those kinds of venues to meet at. That's another, if you're in a larger city and you got a retail outlet that where the genre matches, and it doesn't always have to be tech. Like if your podcast is about, I don't know, I'm on the fly here having a hard time putting these two together, but if you can find something that's close and they've got space around that, they may be willing to host you on that. Maybe a good opportunity to give it a try. You can always ask. I mean, they can just say no, right?
One of the things when I was working on my book was kind of like let people say no to you. And that was Joe Salsihigh was working on this tour. He was doing a local tour. And he said there were a couple of things. Was one, he asked for a sponsorship for the tour. Like, hey, how'd you like to be the main sponsor of this tour? It's going to be 3 cities, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, I picked somebody I already had a relationship with. And then B, knew that if they wanted to be more involved, they could because they'd actually been on a show. And he goes, and then I just picked a price that I thought was pretty high. And I thought, if nothing else, let them say no, and we can go from there. And he said he threw that somewhat higher price at them, and they went, okay. And he was like, oh, I should have asked higher. So,
that can backfire on you, by the way. When you go higher price and you insult someone, like you don't, you got to be careful there. But I think the principle is right, and I don't do enough of this. It's just ask. Like they can always say no. Hey, is there a better price on this? Is there a way for me to get a better price on this? How can I be included in that? Hey, would you like to be on my podcast? Some of those kinds of things. Just let them say no. Let them and then move on from there. They can always say no.
Yeah. Have you heard about the guy from Wikipedia? I'll put a link here in the chat room. It's interesting. The guy from Wikipedia is launching a Facebook alternative. So here again, if we talk about zigging and zagging again, is the fact that with Facebook, right, you are the product. And I'm trying, forgive me for 2 seconds.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm trying to figure out somewhere on a tab somewhere. There it is. I have a Facebook. It's binging my head off. And I'm like, I thought I closed all this stuff. All right. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, except now I can't find you. Jim, where did you go? Okay.
I'm here.
That'll be edit point 1. He said putting in a marker, but I'm like, I've muted everything there is to mute. And all of a sudden I hear bing. And I'm like, oh, that's Facebook. There's Facebook somewhere is open. But anyway, so Facebook, if you think about it, speaking of Facebook, you go there, it's free. They sell your information. That's how they make money. And of course they have ads and things like that. And this is the guy from Wikipedia, one of the co-founders. And from what I understand, if you try to sign up for this thing now, it's you can be on a waiting list, but if you'd like to skip the waiting list, you can donate. So you're paying to be on there. And he's basically saying, look, the ad revenue of, hey, everything's going to be paid for with ads. He's like, not a great model. So he's zagging. And I just thought, well, that's kind of interesting. It'll be interesting to see if it works. But I just saw that was like, well, that, I'll have to go over and maybe dip my toe in the water and see what's going on over there. We'll see.
I think, if you're going to zag, you got to look at, okay, what's working for these people. So in Facebook, what is working? There's a reason everybody's on Facebook, and that's because everybody's on Facebook, right?
Right.
That's the reason it works. If you started a Facebook platform and it was exactly the same as Facebook, and you're just going to compete with them because you are going to be better, chances are you're probably going to fail. You're going to fail if it's the exact same thing, right? You got to come up with this differentiator. In a lot of cases, it's what do people not like about Facebook today? The fact that they're stealing their information, the fact that they're advertising to them. There's the truth in the truth in their, in the data they're putting out there and the headlines and the hacking and all those things. So you got to come up with a super secure, super private, super right. You got to change that to make it work. I think the same is true in your podcast, right? If you're out there in a very populated space, you got to kind of think, hey, how am I going to be different than the rest of them while still doing the same thing? Dave, let me ask you this question. Joe Rogan, right now, probably the most popular, don't you think, podcaster?
He's definitely probably one of the, if not the most downloads, the most known.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joe breaks conventional wisdom. He's not necessarily super prepared all the time. He has long format shows. They're not family friendly. Right. I mean, it's and yet if you were gonna compete with Joe Rogan, right, which again, that's a lesson, and you don't have to be a sheeple in podcasting. Right? Do your thing. Rogan is doing his thing, and he's being very, very successful at it. But if you wanted to compete with Joe Rogan, what would you, if you were a podcast consultant for somebody who was, or you or somebody else, you were going to consult on them, what kind of consulting would you give them? What would you say to them to say, I want a Rogan style podcast, but how would I be different than Rogan? What do you think are the things that differentiate, or maybe he's doing wrong?
Well, some of the stuff he does, he can get away with because, well, he's Joe Rogan. And that's where I wrote a post on the School of Podcasting, how to podcast like Joe Rogan. It's like, okay, number one, do stand up in Boston for 9 years.
Yeah.
That's step one. And then step two, get on TV, but I know the biggest thing, like if I see a guest, like I'm subscribed to Joe's show, I hardly ever listen to Joe on my phone. I'm like, oh, he interviewed Bernie Sanders. Great. Let me go to YouTube and skip the 7 minutes of commercials. I can still speed it up and go that route. So I think but now why does Joe start off his show with 7 minutes of commercials? Because he can. Why? Because he's Joe Rogan. So I think that would be it. If I wanted to completely, if I'm doing the exact same thing that Joe is, then I would say, well, there's got to be somebody out there that wants it in a shorter format, maybe. Right. So if Joe's doing an hour and a half show, maybe I can take, Joe's idea. Let me get Bernie Sanders on the show. Let's show Bernie being human and giving us really good stuff. But let's figure out what are the 4 questions I really need to ask Bernie instead of giving us 10 questions. Let's take those top 4 and boil it down. Because it's not so much that Joe is doing anything wrong. It's just there may be people that go, I can't listen. I don't have 2 hours to listen. Yeah.
Not wrong. Joe's being Joe. He's found his thing, and then it's so good. You can determine that, but the numbers say it's so good. People adapt to him rather than him adapting to people. And so, I think the advice I'd give is just continue to be you. And you may not be as popular as Joe Rogan. You just may not have the personality or the right breaks, or like you said, the right history or the right pedigree, right? All those things have to come together. Rogan has been crushing it in other places for years. So if you've never done any media and you come to a podcast and you're like, I'm expecting tens of thousands of listeners. Okay. You got an uphill battle to climb. You got some work to do.
And just think about the fact that, let's say I have no idea. I'm sure now he can probably fill a couple thousand people in a venue when he does his comedy. But let's say 10 years ago, he was doing smaller comedy clubs, 100, 200 people maybe. What if 3 times a week, you could tell a group of 200 people, a group of different people, 3 times a week, hey, by the way, I do a podcast. Check it out on my website, joerogan.com or whatever it is. That's going to also grow your audience over time. And that's where I see so many people get hung up on stats and, Chartable and all this other stuff. And I'm like, and it just sounds, the questions I get sometimes are like, look, I want to know, can you tell me on this episode how many downloads I got in Kazakhstan? And I'm like, I just want to go, why? It's 6. You got 6. Now what? I'm dying to know why they needed to know that, because it is super specific. And literally, it just sounds like they've spent their whole day trying to figure this out. And I'm like, okay, well, my goal again is to help them. So I do my best. I'm like, well, from what I saw, 10 were in Russia, 6 were in Kazakhstan, and here you go. Hope that helps. But I just go, if you could take the time you're spent, like we're talking earlier about focusing on hardware and all, and like, go hang out with your audience. That's what Joe does, but he's doing it on a stage. So It's always interview.
Yeah. Well, just be you, I think, is the thing. And
that's it.
And go with it from there. That you may not be wildly popular, by the way. That's just maybe a thing. You just may not be in the right place at the right time, doing the right things. You just got to keep working it.
Well, and exactly, you have to be you. And I'm taking this class on YouTube, and part of it was people got to review your channel and you got to review theirs. And they said, look, if you're going to take part of this class, it's optional. But if you're going to take part of this class, we expect you to give honest, good feedback. And if you see something wrong, like, this is what you need to fix. So if you don't want to participate, if you're not willing to get constructive feedback, then don't join. And if you do join, we expect you to point this out. And the one person I was watching, and it's just because they were new, I swear, is when the thing came on and they're looking in the camera, it would be like me talking now, like I'm almost reading something, and there was almost no tone of voice. It wasn't like beyond borderline where I'm talking like this, but you could just tell they were freaking out because the red light was on. And what was weird is then they did another one where it was like Feedback Friday, and they'd fire it up, and she was like, hey, welcome so much to Feedback Friday, blah, blah. And all of a sudden she was relaxed and she was talking to one person. She wasn't reading a script. I don't know if she was or not, but I was like, man, these are so much better because you're being, like you said, she's being you. Mm-hmm. And for her, it was like, it wasn't like an official video. This was just her talking to the camera, answering her questions, and it's laid back. And I was like, do more of those, or treat your videos, the official videos, like those, because I said, I can't take your voice. I go, you sound like, somebody has a gun to your head off camera that I can't see, that if you say the wrong word, they're going to like blow out your brain. So
yeah. Well, it's finding that persona of you too, by the way. It doesn't have to be exactly you, but that the persona, because I know a lot of folks are very, very shy, and then they get behind the microphone and this extrovert comes out, but it only comes out while they're on the microphone. Well, that's your persona, right? And if you can maintain that, if that's consistent, run with it. You don't have to be the exact same on camera or on mic that you are in real life. You can be different, but if it's working, go with it.
Yeah, I hope Bandrew is still around. Randy says, but does Joe toss boxes? No, but Podcastage does. So today we'll be reviewing Kleenex. It's great. But here's the thing. On his last video, he had evil elf Bandrew like pop up from somewhere and start pelting like review Bandrew with bean bags. I about fell off my treadmill. I was laughing so hard because it was so like, what? And all of a sudden he's just, here comes little evil Bandrew. He's like, and all she's like, and I'm like, first of all, and then you're like, I'm trying to figure like, how do you hit yourself in the face with, like, when you're how do you have somebody off camera hit you in the face? I'm like, it was just so, and I was just, nice. For me, that was a great example of A, Bandrew being Bandrew, and then B, it's that you never know what you're going to get factor. And he doesn't do a lot of that, but he does every now and then. He'll throw something in the video that you're like, wait, what? So that's always kind of, if you can mix those in every now and then. I know for me, I think I'm at episode 698. I have no idea what I'm going to do for 700, and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to go, hey, thanks for 700 episodes, and just go that route. But I used to like completely break my format and do all sorts of wacky stuff. And I looked at like what I've done the last couple of years and was like, you know what? I think I'll just go, hey, thanks for 700 episodes. Keep listening and let's move on.
I swear to God, you're in a time warp sometimes, because I feel like I've been listening to School of Podcasting since maybe like 200, but I don't know if it has been that long. I mean, I think I remember, when was Pinky and the Wiz?
That was 400.
Okay, so, and that seemed like I had been listening to you for a while at 400, and all of a sudden you're at 700, and you're like, holy crap, are you in a time, like it goes quick. We've been doing this a while. That's one of those kinds of deals. I think, Dave, for you too, there's a lot of podcasts about podcasting that have popped up that got real popular for a while. I think it's kind of leveled out at this point. I haven't seen. Oh,
it's not. Is
it still growing?
It's still, really? Every now and then I'll turn. Okay. I'm like, really? Yeah. There's Buzzsprout just came out with a couple. Yeah. So about the time you think, that's enough of those,
slowing down, maybe not.
What episode do you think we're on? What do you think we're recording?
We're getting close to 300. I think we're 2 270 or 280.
You look at you, 273
Okay.
as we record this. Anything we talk about today, you will find at askthepodcastcoach.com/273. So
yeah, by the way, we talk about that about every 3 months. So I try to think back. Okay, what did we say last time? It was 60s. And
yeah,
so it doesn't matter on this show, but I think, again, Dave, you continue to be out there, continue to provide weekly content, continue to just be faithful to that. How many of those have we seen start? And hey, no judgment on this.
Right.
If you don't want to continue, it's fine. But how many of those have we seen they start and they get a year or two or maybe 3 in, and then it's like, this is hard, and they quit, and you're still there. So I think that's another area. If you think about growing your listeners, don't quit.
That's it.
Stay around. Quit.
Yeah. And there will come a time when you'll go, this isn't as easy as I thought it was going to. Because I actually helped somebody this week that was starting a podcast about podcasting, and they thought changing their feed would give them more SEO. And I was like, no, not at all. And I'm like, and it's not ratings and reviews. I go, it's downloads and subscribers. Because again, Apple search, Spotify search is horrendous. It's bad. And they weren't coming up. And I have to answer that question at least once a day, if not 3 times a day. Like, why am I not coming up in Apple search? And I'm like, well, here's the thing. It stinks. And the answer is keep at it and don't quit. Be yourself, promote yourself. But the people that we can find all the time.
I was going to say, those friends who don't stink. That's what I was going to make that transition before you said anything. Darn it. You beat me to it. And Dave locked up. So while Dave is figuring out, he must have clicked the button that caused something to happen. We'll see if Dave, can you guys in the chat room, can you guys still hear me? I'm assuming it's just Dave that locked up. Yeah, give you guys a second to get that done. If I could do the awesome subscriber bit, I would, but Dave controls this way. He has all the mechanisms for the awesome subscribers. So yeah, he's locked up as well. Just me. You guys can hear me. Okay. Well, we'll continue on, see if we can get Dave back in the channel and edit point for sure. And while we're waiting on Dave, what I want to hear from you guys, let me know, where are you at in your podcasting numbers? So to put the podcast name and what episode number you're at in the chat room while Dave is. Do you see yourself?
I'm back. Now, and I'm going to remove the other me from.
There we go. No, I was covering. I'm
having to try again. We'll see if this does. I will know not to do this.
Well, it's funny. I was going to make that transition that you were making to our awesome subscribers, and you beat me to it. While you're doing that,
wow,
I'm having the audience. Ooh, that's kind of cool. That's psychedelic. I asked the audience if they would put their current podcast name and the number they're at in the chat room while we are going through this. You can read those too if you want, Dave.
I was going to say, I'm going to try one more time. And there we go. Now, what did I do? Okay, whatever. So yeah, we're talking about our awesome supporters at askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. Keep in mind, the teacher's pet is now open. This is where you can get 1 hour of consulting with me. Only allow one person to do this. And so if that's you, go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome and you can sign up. Our $20 supporters, thank you so much to Jim Harold from the one and only Podlords. I love that. Really good interviews. He's it's funny because when Jim first started off, not that he was bad, but number one, Jim, I love you. Jim asked everybody, do you think the little guy's going to get squeezed out? Do you think that's really what it should have been the name of the show. And he's kind of like, now he's kind of found his own. He's getting into it. And I'm really enjoying the interviews over there. Greg over at debtshepherd.com. If you're looking to boost your financial wellness in 2020, Greg would be a great guy to go listen to. Glenn the Geek Hebert over at Horse Radio Network. If you want to learn about cleaning your horse's sheath, say that 3 times fast.
Excuse me?
I'll explain that in a minute. Josh Rivers over at podcastingexperiments.com. Max Trescott up in the air at aviationnewstalk.com. Shane at spybrary.com. Carrie Bond at keywestperspective.com. That is a podcast about the island life, as you might imagine, in Key West. Carl White also doing a local podcast, Life in the Carolinas podcast.com. Kim Craggy at toastmasters101.net. So if you want to get your speak on, check it out again, toastmasters101.net. And Jay Cleveland Payne has updated his website. Find him over at morebettermedia.com. He's helping a whole bunch of people make shows. And if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. We can't, I should almost tell people no more sponsors or no more awesome supporters, because I've only got enough music for that time.
It fits perfectly.
It's like
it fits in there perfectly.
Yeah. So what were we talking about? So anyway, we have people in the chat room, 240, 38, 191, 545, but that's part of my previous question. Jason has like 8 million. Jason just celebrated, I think, 11 years. Jason Bryant, Matt Talk Online. So he has had like 8 million shows because he has a bazillion shows and that whole 9 yards. So
interesting that most of those were over 100. So our listeners, okay, unscientific. This was an unscientific survey, since I have the Gallup shirt on today. Unscientific survey we just did. This doesn't mean anything, but it was interesting. There was just one. Kim said Toastmaster 101 is at 38 this season. I'm assuming, Kim, you mean you've done 38, or it's just 38 this year. But most of those are above 100, and I think that says something about the listener here in the longevity of it. This started as kind of goofing around, you and me, that now is 273 shows of doing this almost every week. Not as consistent as a School of Podcasting, Dave. You do that like freaking clockwork. I do not. There's nothing. It's like, I had my appendix removed and I produced a podcast.
Well, what I started doing based on listener feedback, in fact, I just did 2 of them this week, was I started doing more interviews. That was one thing that kind of came up. People are like, I really like your interviews. And I'm like, you don't like me? But no, that's fine. But that's fine. It breaks it up a little bit. It breaks it up. It's not the same old, here's Dave going to talk about something and blah, blah, blah. And then, Kim says if you count all of her closed podcasts, I'm close to 100. So, and then Fred is celebrating 14 years. Fred, of course, does podcastreporter.com. He's at episode 229. And there's yet another old school podcast about podcasting that Fred covers all sorts of different areas of stuff that I'm like he just talked about some new, what do you call it? Network kind of things. It's a portal of, podcasts that are all banding together to get exposure. So
like a network.
Yeah. And he actually had a pod faded show, Struggling Entrepreneur. Oh, by the way, Fred, I got your email. We'll just do this right here on the air. If you know who your guest or who your host is, if you have a host that you want to use, let me know. And I will actually probably do that later on tonight. Fred needs a new
migrating.
Yeah. Fred needs a new, he had Struggling Entrepreneur and he did that for many, many moons. And he's kind of bringing back a different slant on the entrepreneur. And he's like, hey, I need a podcast website set up. And I'm like, okay. So I haven't said okay. So Fred, I'm saying okay. I just haven't emailed him back to say, who's your host? How are we doing that? Where are we doing it? That whole 9 yards. So,
nice.
But if you don't quit, those things add up after a while. And if you have a question, by the way, and you want to pop in here and ask it as we close in on the 10 minutes.
Dave, you had said something interesting while we're waiting for folks if they want to join us. You had said something interesting right before we went to the awesome subscribers, which was about people changing their feed for SEO. For SEO, yeah. And I think they're missing the point. Yeah, you're the in your slug, right? When you produce a post, it creates a URL,
right?
And that is SEO. Like in there is buried. Google looks at those, looks at your URL for your post, and gets information out of it. But I think so. Are they? What's happening is is that being transferred to the feed?
Yeah.
Is that what they think?
So what it is like, let's say this episode was called, askthepodcastcoach.com/ what we're talking USB interfaces.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that will in some weird way potentially affect SEO. Count. Right.
Yeah, right.
You're right. So they're doing that and they're like, oh, that must apply to the feed. And my feed is, marketing musician whatever. And I want to change it to get more fans whatever. And I'm like, No, the feed doesn't, unless you're.
I'm not sure Google is crawling the feed the same
No,
way. It's still a URL,
right.
and it has an XML file, right? And so it goes in, it's got some data it's pulling out of it. Google may be crawling that and doing some things. I need an expert on this one. Maybe Daniel knows or they could be recognizing it as a just as a feed, and they're like, no, we're going to ignore it. I mean, Google does ignore things, so I don't exactly know for sure which one they're doing. But to your point, like that is so high hanging fruit that, like optimizing your feed URL for SEO, Google search. Man, there's a billion other ways to do this before, especially because there's such consequences to changing your feed,
Yeah.
So,
there's huge consequences. I have to explain that to people all the time, that they come in and they want to change their feed and they don't realize that if you don't do that right, and in many cases they don't, they will like completely start from zero. Like, oh, you've been doing this for 10 months and you've got, 85 episodes out. If you make this one change, you lose all of your audience, all of your audio quits working, your feed in Apple quits working. And I will explain this to people and they will still go, no, go ahead and do that. I'm like, and there are times when I feel bad because I just keep emailing them back going, are you really, really, really sure you want to do that? So
yeah, no, it's, and I think I still have Home Tech, the name of the show when I first started it. I'm pretty sure that's still in my feed. Like, but there's such consequences, and the show is now called Home Gadget Geeks. So there's such consequences, and it's so hard to get that right. You could do it, but man, you're going to do a bunch of gyrations, and you run the risk of losing people along the way. Just not worth it to try and change that feed URL. And Daniel has an answer for us.
Yeah, Daniel from the audacitytopodcast.com. He says the feed URL itself doesn't really matter like domains. The full path matters. So yeah, keep that in mind. It's not so much. And that's like, I think we did this last week when I said, Jim, what's the feed of Ask the Podcast Coach? And you very honestly went,
I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, like right now, I just got done listening to Speak Up Podcasting. That's that podcast about storytelling. Listen to 64 episodes. Couldn't tell you what the guy's feed is. I could guess because he's a Libsyn customer, but no. So it's if you think that's what's going to help, and this is the thing again. I think sometimes people are looking for anything. Like if I could just if maybe that's the golden switch. Maybe I need to update. And I'm like, no, it's really, you got to get out there with your customers or your listeners and things like that. And
hopefully we don't have a podcast guru out there preaching that, do we? Have you heard of one of them saying, go change your feed, make sure your feed's that way? Because that's, again, that's super high hanging fruit. Like
we still have people saying put keywords in places where you're not supposed to put keywords. Because I got one this week. They're like, hey, Apple removed my show, and I go in and it was like name of show, keyword, and I'm like, yeah, that's not, and then author name, keyword. I'm like, you really can't get more stuffed with keywords than you've done here, and that's just like. So. Bangs
makes a point, chat room, talking a little bit about, okay, so now that Google is finding and discovering podcasts, not, you don't necessarily submit to them anymore. How are they handling that feed URL? And is it making a difference, at least in their podcasts offering that they're doing? Is that making a difference in discoverability? I would think they're going into the feed, finding the name of the show and indexing that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. I would know, I would not index, if it were me and I were indexing a search, I would not index it off of the title in the feed, because URLs are awful. They're terrible. I mean, they're not meant for that. We never started, when Vint Cerf was building the internet, he had no idea things would become the way they are, and we would do the things we were doing inside URLs. And so, they're not designed for that. I would think, I don't know, like I said, I don't know for sure, but I think Google would be like, okay, I'm going to go into the XML file and I'm going to find the name of the podcast and index that. Wouldn't you think? Now, I don't know for sure, but I would think that would be the case.
Yeah, I think, they find that you have to have that special, I forget what the code is, but there's some sort of code you have to put on your website that says, hey, we have a podcast and here it is. And then it goes and crawls the feed and adds it to their stuff. Here's the bad news about Google, because we had somebody this week where you could go to their Google podcast page, for lack of a better phrase. So they had been indexed on Google. You went to their website. You saw all of their episodes. You could click play and listen to them on the internet perfectly fine. Go into the Google Podcast app, click play, nothing happens, 0. Or it might even say this can't be streamed or whatever. But if you downloaded it and then hit play, it worked. I looked at their file. I'm like, this is probably a variable bit rate or something funky with their file. Absolutely nothing wrong with their file. Here's what's the problem. Who do you call it? Google. There's no, like, we have a contact at Apple. We have a contact at Spotify. We have a contact at, iHeartMedia. There's no way that I know of.
That guy, the guy that was the podcast movement, he from Google, are they reachable?
I'm going to say I have to go dig out my cards, because that was actually somebody I was going to say, hey, what do you do? Because first of all, I can't even see like anything. Like, that guy could be pulling that file that I'm clicking on play. Might not even be, that might be something on his website or from another media host, or there's no way to peel the curtain back on a Google podcast listing and go, okay, what's the technology behind this? And they got to fix that. That's not going to work.
Daniel makes an interesting point. He said what Todd Cochran says about owning your feed URL is potentially being misunderstood as SEO and ranking being tied to what that feed URL is. And Daniel, that's actually a really good observation. I think that could be causing some confusion, not intentional. I think we understand. Todd is like, no. You need to, like, if you go to a hosting company and they're controlling everything, you can't. You need to control that. That needs to be your property and what you do.
Yeah.
I could see how that may cause a little confusion. Not to Todd's. That's not Todd's fault. He's saying is absolutely true.
Well, there is it's been around forever. There's a website called Bandzoogle, and they make really pretty websites with e-commerce built in for bands and easy to make a player for people to listen to your music and buy your music. It's very band central. And they decided, hey, let's get into podcasting. So they did. And somebody said, hey, I'm ready to put my podcast on a real podcast host. So they came over to Libsyn, and I'm like, cool, let's import your stuff. We did that. I said, now you got to do is reach out to Bandzoogle and say, hey, we need a 301 redirect. And he couldn't get any reply. So I went over and sent an email to Bandzoogle, and they went, a what? And then they said they understood what a 301 redirect was. They go, but we can't do that to that guy's feed. Like, they could do 301 redirects maybe of their whole account or whatever. And I just went, man, here's another example of a company that's not a podcast company getting into podcasting and not doing it. Now there's a new thing I started playing with, and it's kind of there's going to be a lot of these. That's my prediction for 2020. There are going to be a lot of Patreon competitors, and this thing is called Substack. And what it is, it's going to be interesting because I'm like, because part of me goes, that's not going to work. Substack is a free email service, free forever. If you just and what it basically is, it's Medium. It's makeyourOwnMedium.com. So you can post your stuff. It'll send it out via email. But if you decide that this particular thingamabob is for people that contribute only, they're going to take 10%. Which is very Patreon-ish. I'm like, okay, so that's cool. So what did they decide to do? Hey, we're going to dip our toe into podcasting. And I'm like, all right, let's nip this in the bud. So I emailed them, and this guy, because I signed up, I'm like, let's kick the tires on this. And the CEO or somebody was like, hey, I'm Harold from such and such. Thanks so much. And I said, hey, I see you guys are getting into podcasting. Do you guys do 301 redirects? I said, because if you don't, you need to. And I was very happy to say, they go, oh, yeah, we will do a 301. You just have to ask for it. And I'm like, because I don't see it in the dashboard. And they're like, well, number one, our podcasting stuff is very, very beta. And number two, yeah, we'll do it. You just have to redirect. So I was at least happy to see that they had a clue. But it was an interesting service. And I think we're going to see Harry Duran just started playing with glow.io, I think it is. And that's a really interesting interface, because I went to Harry's whatever episode. You click on a button and it's like, hey, I would like to do such and such. You click on it, a thing comes up, you put in your credit card, and then presto. So it's right from within your app. I didn't actually finish it, but I believe they're the ones that will do the you can listen to this bonus content on whatever app you want. So Bang says Subscribe Star is another one that's going to be a competitor of Patreon. And then Daniel says about Todd has hinted that the feed's domain may matter. Yeah, but he's too cryptic, and I'm wondering if his bias toward owning your feed is affecting his interpretation. Well, we should.
We should just ask him. We know Todd. We should just ask him. Hey, what's your what do you think about this?
But he has a point, because there are people. So what happens with the guy from Bandzoogle? What does he do? Well, you put out an episode that says, hey, if you've enjoyed listening to this content, well, first of all, you go over to Apple and you switch your feed. And then you put out one episode that only goes to Bandzoogle, and you say, hey, if you've really enjoyed getting this content, thank you so much. I'm so happy that you're enjoying it, but I've changed some things on the back end. And if you want to continue to get this great content, and I would love to have you, simply, and this sounds funny, just unsubscribe from the app you're in and then resubscribe. But I don't know what that's going to do on Podchaser. Like, you'd almost want to like change it in Apple, wait 48 hours, and then hope that has changed in all the other apps. So I always tell people, plan on losing about 40% of your audience. 30 to 40% of your audience isn't going to get the message that you moved or whatever. So it's just a crappy. That's why I get upset and mad when I see companies do this, because it's like, you shouldn't even got into podcasting and that whole 9 yards.
Dave, what do we got coming up in the post show here? What do you think?
It is time for post show. Holy cow!
Time flies, doesn't it?
We're going to talk a little bit about Apple's has put out an email. That's actually what I had to talk about today. We just kind of went off and like, that's the way.
Sorry, I took it down the hardware path.
Yeah.
After you said you didn't want to talk about hardware, I took it down.
No, that was great. I loved it. Yeah, Daniel says Podchaser. Are we going to talk about we could. I just interviewed the guy from Podchaser for a future episode of the School of Podcasting. But we could talk about Apple's they have some new things. We're definitely going to talk about hosts and guests. I mentioned that, but we need to talk about that again. And we might hint why Apple stats are different than, what you have in your boy, my mouth is just not working today.
That's okay.
But so we'll talk about, and of course we'll talk about whatever you want, but definitely the new email came out from Apple. And also, if you're not getting the emails from Apple, thanks to Steve Stewart, stevestewart.me, he solved the mystery. Why am I not getting those notifications from Apple? And we'll talk about that.
Yeah, because I want to know that first thing, because I didn't get the email. So let's talk about that first thing.
I have not got it yet. Jim, what's coming up on theaverageguy.tv?
Yeah, actually the next 2 weeks, we're this week and next, a bunch on Microsoft. So if you're in that space, that's our space. We've done that a lot, but 2 Microsoft experts over the last 2 weeks, or last week and this week coming up. So theaverageguy.tv.
And on the School of Podcasting, I'm interviewing Heather Osgood, who is an ad agency for podcasters. So we talk about setting the expectations of a podcaster, setting the expectations of an advertiser, what people are charging, what to expect, where's that whole industry going, and that'll be on this week's episode of the School of Podcasting. So hang around, and we'll do another half hour of post show. Thanks again to all of our awesome supporters at askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. Stick around.